For many years, rural education in Nigeria has meant education characterized by very poor infrastructure. For less or no attention from inadequate infrastructure, resource scarcity, and a shortage of qualified teachers, and a lot more. While in Nigeria's National Policy on Education, FRN 1998, it stated that the federal government has adopted education as an instrument for affecting national development in all areas of the nation. Well, it seems this was said in the absence of proper procedure and process to implement, taking critical look at the education system in rural areas of Nigeria. The overwhelming widespread of illiteracy is obvious to the discerning. This is our subject of discussion today on the podcast of Leadership Dialogue. I am Chiko Dinaka Dili, and I have here in the studio Miriam Ene of the Miriam Ene Foundation. Good to have you join me.
Thank you. It's really nice to be here.
Yeah, and will I say good to have you back in Nigeria?
Yes, yes. It's always nice to be in Nigeria.
All right. What's your assessment of rural education in Nigeria?
You know what? I think that it's fair to say that it has deteriorated over the years. And education in general, like public education, has deteriorated over the years.
So, on what basis are you drawing this analysis from?
So I'm a product of a unity school. So I went to Federal Government College Enugu and I graduated in the class of 1994. So looking back, and that was a public school, and it's still, Unity School still exists today. So if you look at public schools back then compared to now, you see a big change. A lot of people, like when I look at my friends, a lot of us, our children, we wouldn't put them in the same Unity schools today. So why? Because of the deterioration in the quality of education. And we can say that's same for state schools, for schools in the rural communities as well. It's just widespread. We've seen a general deterioration in the investment in public education.
How does this deterioration affect leadership, in your opinion?
So the masses go to public schools, right? And so now what we have is we've created this huge difference between the elite and everybody else. So now we have a few people that are able to afford private schools, and that's really the elite. But, we're not giving the opportunity for talent to access the best, like, quality education. Back like a few years ago, and it's not a long time ago, it was based on talent. You would get to primary six, you would write your common entrance exams. It was based on your grade, and that qualified you to get into the stronger public schools, and everybody had access. Like the unity schools, like federal government colleges, everybody had access, and they were the best schools then, right? So ultimately, I feel that now what's happening is we have this system where the rich can afford a different caliber, different, and then they can get access to better jobs because of that. They can get access to better positions. And so we create this huge, the gap just widens, where in the past, right, like if you had access to the same education, ultimately you have access to the same jobs. Your parents could be nobodies, and then all of a sudden, well, you still are able to become a lawyer, a doctor, a senior advocate of Nigeria. Like you could just do a lot of things, even though your parents did not have education. But now that narrative will be very hard to achieve. Now, if you're in a poor community, in rural communities, and you don't have access to good education, it affects your chances of getting access to a good university program. Just affects really the kind of jobs you get, the kind of positions you get in life. So it wasn't like that before, but we'll see more and more of that now.
Now, speaking of which, when we talk about the sharp divide in an education system, I would like to ask who the blame goes to. Should we blame the federal government for all of this degrading or plummeting education system in our communities? Or do we blame the community leaders, the local government, the state governments, and then the parents? Who takes the blame?
Could we divide the blame maybe? Could we just share it out as in everybody has a responsibility to play? And what I believe's happened is that there's been a lack of focus on on the true the things that need to be done for us to create, like when we forget the foundation, it deteriorates, right? So over time, I would say we've neglected the elements that allow for us to have a strong building, and it's the foundation. So the foundation being an investment in by the government, yes, an investment by parents, an investment by teachers, an investment by community leaders. So in terms of who's to blame, let's say whose responsibility is it? It's everybody's responsibility. And I even think media wise, it's there's a role for media to play in re-educating people as to the importance of investing in education. A lot of times we focus on a lot of things, but we forget that education is fundamental. It's just a fundamental right, and we can all share responsibility, all of us.
And is this fundamental right being bastardized as it were? I ask this question because as much as education is the fundamental right of every individual, in a rural perspective, we have seen situations where even the children you send to school somehow find their way out of school. Sometimes some people tell you that it's the quality of teachers you have in these schools are allegedly have faked.
Yeah, it's sad because I spent 1 week, the last 1 week, from Monday to Friday, every day I was in a school in a rural community from 8 in the morning until 2 p.m., like literally every day. So I went from classroom to classroom. And I can tell you, because as I work on giving back to the communities, it's important for me to assess how we're giving back and if it's effective, what we need to tweak. So we had done a big giveaway in November of textbooks, school supplies, in the rural communities. And so I went to assess, after spending millions of naira in textbooks and books, wanted to see how it was being used. And what I noticed was that, like you just said, the teachers, right? I noticed primarily two things that I have to work on now. Primarily, it's one thing to give textbooks, right, and school supplies, but the quality of the teachers. Like, if you don't have the right teachers, no matter how many books and school supplies that we as a foundation give to the schools, they're limited, right? Like, so for instance, I went to one class where they opened the textbook. So our foundation gave. There's 7 subjects, and we gave textbooks for every child and for every subject. And so whenever it's a particular subject, they can open up the textbook. And the idea was that it was supposed to help the teachers with teaching. But what we noticed was that when they would open the textbook, the teachers would recite the lines, and the children would repeat what the teacher said. But when I said, I told the class to pause, and I told the children, they were in primary 3, yes, the primary 3, and I said to the children, okay, one child, I wanted one child to read the textbook, and they couldn't. So the whole time we'd been watching them for 2 minutes or 3 minutes, they were reciting what the teacher was saying, and the teacher thought that they were teaching, but literally, the blackboard is filled with all kinds of things. So I said to the teacher, can any child here read everything you've written on the blackboard? Not one child in the primary 3 could read. And they had like different, and the foundation had put whiteboards because the school, they were writing on the walls. And last year we had put whiteboards in all of the classrooms. So when you're investing, you're thinking that you're investing to improve the quality. So although we put whiteboards in all of the school, the whiteboards by itself cannot improve the education. And although we bought textbooks for 7 subjects per classroom, the textbooks by themselves, and those were millions of naira, but by themselves, they cannot improve the education. I now notice that the teachers, is the problem I have with the teachers. The teachers are writing on the board, and the children cannot read what you're writing. So the whiteboard is filled with, civic education, social, like all these things, but the children are just copying, but they can't read. Not one child could read. So, and I asked them to read, I wrote simple sentences, 3-letter words. And in primary 3, they could not read cats. They could not read dog, okay? They could not read 3-letter words. And that was alarming to me, right? But I don't blame only the teachers. I blame the parents as well. So I had a meeting with all the parents in the evening the next day. We had a meeting. And I specifically told the parents, when your children come home, they need to study. But I don't think they're doing that. I don't think they're studying. But I think the elites, the people that are well off, I think their children come home. I know their children come home and they go to lessons and they study. But I think in rural communities, they don't understand that parents have a role to play and that the alphabets and learning to read is not only the responsibility of teachers, it's the responsibility of parents as well. So it's impossible. I cannot understand why any child that has gone to primary 1, primary 2, primary 3 can still not read 3-letter words. That's a failure, and that's a flawed. We have a
flawed situation.
We do, and I think the role in terms of solutions, we have to partner with government, because in my state, my governor, I'm from Enugu State, and my governor, Peter Mba, is doing an excellent job of putting smart schools in all the communities. Like,
is it about installing smart equipment for teachers who can barely use this equipment?
So that's it. That's one step. He's doing one part, but on its own, that alone will not solve the crisis that we have today.
There seems to be little emphasis on improving teaching.
That's right.
So what solutions can be put in place to ensure that teachers go through the requisite trainings and, of course, the right people are hired for the job?
I agree. That you've basically said it. Like, I think the problem too is compensation. Okay, because when you ask about the compensation, you realize that you cannot attract talent at that level. If you're told that somebody's salary is 30,000 naira a month, okay, like, how can you attract talent at 30,000 naira,
which is less than $50?
Less than $50 a month, and the person's has to pay for transport, like a bus to get to the school. Like, literally, the compensation is something that I think will attract better talent. I think that's an area to look into. I haven't done a deeper dive, but I know that as a foundation, we're paying for a teacher in one of the rural communities that we're supporting because of combined classes. What we noticed last year, they combined 3 classes in one. And when I was doing my evaluation, I was like, you can't have the teacher. It's impossible for the teacher to teach 3 classes, like 3 grades together. She cannot literally focus. It's too difficult. So we have to split the class. But they have a criteria that based on the number of children, because it's a rural community, they didn't have enough of, so they had to merge it so that they're allowed to have maybe 50 or 60 children per teacher. So they could merge it. But in merging it, you're not able to effectively teach each grade. So a lot of schools now have what they call PTA teachers. I know that for a fact because when I went back to the unity schools too, the federal government colleges as well, some of the teachers are PTA teachers. They're paid by the PTA. They're not paid by, that means they're paid by parents and they're paid by, they're not paid by the government. And the reason in our era, we did not have PTA teachers, but the sad thing about PTA teachers is they don't get the benefits. So they don't qualify for like the pension. So ultimately, the caliber of teachers you get wouldn't be the same. So the idea to rely on the PTA, the parents, to pay for teachers, is not. I don't think it's an effective long-term solution.
And that further shows the decadence in education system.
It does. It does. In like I said, when I graduated, in that era, when I finished my Unity School in 1994, we did not have PTA teachers. But now, literally 1/3 of the teachers in some of these schools are PTA teachers, right? And they're paid less. They're actually paid less. They're less
That's
qualified.
lesser than the 30,000 naira believed to be the
No,
standard.
no, was my this is not for I have to this is for primary because I'm sure depending on where
Depending on where you.
yes, that was for primary school and that's a rural community. But I'm pretty sure that once you get to the city, maybe the salary goes up a little bit. But still, if you do a deeper dive, I'm sure that there's room for improvement in terms of the compensation. If we want to attract talent, we have to pay, right? They have to be compensated. If not, people will not find the teaching profession as worthy of their time. And when you go to developed countries, teachers are paid very well. Like, it's the teachers are the ones training the people that become the lawyers,
The lawyers.
and the doctors. So why would other professions be paid more than the teachers? Right? You go to here, if you ask your children what they want to be and they say they want to be a teacher, you'll look at them like, don't be a teacher. Why do you want to be a teacher? No. But in developed countries, it's very noble. Like it's actually something that it's great. It's great to be a teacher. And some people are called to be teachers. We need teachers, but we need to the compensation really needs to be right for us to attract talent. And some people, it's their calling to be teachers. They've been called. God has given them that drive and passion, and it's what they. But because of the compensation, a lot of them start to do other things, right?
And is this, when we talk a lot about education in Nigeria vis-a-vis leadership, is it not also surprising that in the Nigeria's 2025 budget, for instance, about 3.52 trillion naira was earmarked for education, which is roughly about 7.3% of the total budget, and a decrease from the 2024 budget of 8.21%. Where does this leave us as a nation?
Yeah, I think that it makes us. We should ask questions, right? Like for me, I feel that the emphasis is flawed, and we need to start to ask questions. If we don't ask questions, then who will be the voice for the children?
Because, over time, what I have seen with the government, especially in the last 5 years, is that there's been a lot more emphasis on curbing security in the country.
True.
Some
is
tell
important.
you that they're rebuilding the country, and you're tempted to ask, rebuild the country from what? Because when you say you're budgeting XYZ amount for security, and then the people who are at risks of becoming mayhems in the community are left to wallow, then how then do we say we are securing the future of the country? Because you heard about the Boko Haram incident, the herdsmen attack, and when you look at all of this intricately, you see that most of those people who eventually get into all of this are mainly from rural communities. These are people who had poor access to education, enlightenment, and all. So, and that brings me to this very important thing that people do say, that when it comes to ensuring security, it starts from the home and then to the schools. And the real education should be the community education. Because I believe that when more children are enlightened to the dangers of insecurity, dangers of causing mayhem, joining bad groups, and also attaining quality education, they would never be lured to do
I agree.
the wrong things. So how do we get there? How do we get this government to believe in education? Because it does feel like the government has zero emphasis on education. 7.3% is laughable, isn't it?
Yeah, I think we need to talk about it more. I think there needs to be more. Security is important. So it wouldn't be fair to compare one thing to another thing. Like I wouldn't compare security to it. Like we need security. So the idea of emphasis,
But
the
there is a
emphasis,
nexus between security and education.
yes,
We can talk security without education.
that's right, because it does lead to insecurity. I
Exactly.
agree. I agree. Like, and the more we talk about it, right, we start to talk about solutions, because the reality is that all the children going into universities isn't really the right solution for everybody. We need to talk about skills development, and we need to talk about
Vocational training.
vocational training. So when we talk about rural education, at the core basic level, everybody needs to learn to read and write. Reading and writing is just like fundamental, like that's just the basic. Like if you're, by the time you're done your primary education, you should be a strong, like you should be able to read and write, and with no hesitation, no errors. Like even though technology does help to improve, but I think that's basic. However, not the more we talk about education and what's needed in this age, we will start to solve and find solutions that are specific to the ecosystem in Nigeria. That what we need in Nigeria may not actually be exactly the way it was 20 years ago, 30 years ago, and may not be exactly what is needed in other countries. We have a young population, and if we, because of AI and because of technology, the path forward after secondary school does not necessarily have to be university. But if we don't prep the young people with the right mindset and education in primary and secondary school, they're not equipped to fly, really, right? I feel that now with the phone and technology, you can literally work anywhere in the world, right? So it's important that we prepare our children with the right kind of education in primary school and secondary school, so that they can create their own world, right? They can create their own. So the solution is, let's focus more on this topic, and for you to talk more about this, so that more people put their heads together to solve what rural education should look like. Is it flawed right now? We have things to fix, yes.
Yeah.
And I don't like the idea that it's only the government that should fix it.
And then there is this popular say in Nigeria, quote and unquote, education is a scam. So how do you eradicate this from the minds of young Nigerians into believing that education is the future to leadership in the country?
Yeah, the ignorance, it's really ignorance, really, right? Like there's, because a lot of people have made a lot of money on other, like using, the internet, or using, and doing certain things that may be illegal, and they've made money quickly. So people may think that education isn't worth it. It's because a lot of people after graduation find it difficult to find a good job, and so then they wonder if the investment was worth it. All that can be changed, right? Like if we revamp education. So maybe the problem is not, maybe the problem is the content of the content of education that we have today. Maybe we're too theoretical, and we need to get more into practical, right? And so if you have like, if education now is focused only on textbooks, and that's like old school.
Theoretical,
Yes.
practical education system, and
And that's why people may think it's a scam, is because education hasn't evolved. And so now they invest 4 years in university, they come out, they still don't have a job. Of course, you'll think it's a scam, because after 4 years of your time, 4 years, you might as well have done something like a skill, and so.
so the get rich quick thing syndrome is eating deep into the education and fabrics of Nigeria. But what practical steps do you suggest the government needs to pick up in revamping education?
The one thing I would say is for government specifically is get the right people in leadership. When you have the right people at the table, you can solve problems. So, the right step isn't one solution, but if it, as a governor or if you're in a position of leadership and pick the right people, the right ministers, the right commissioners, the right, like in the people that are making the decisions on how to navigate the next phase if you have the right heads, then they'll be open to listening. Because when you think you have the solution, that's the problem. It's when you think that your idea is the right. But if you're open to listening to the teachers, listening to the parents, like for 1 week, what I did was I went class by class and I spent right from assembly to 2 in the afternoon when they're done. And I just observed and I gave comments. And the reason I did that is I did not want to assume that I really knew what the problems were. In November, I gave this particular school all brand new uniforms, brand new shoes, brand new socks, school bags with all the school supplies. Like I said, we put whiteboards in all the classrooms, all the textbook. But I didn't want to assume that that was enough and that I was solving the problem or the crisis. If you hire the right people in leadership, they won't assume that their idea is the right idea. So to government, I would say pick the right leaders. The right leaders will listen to the principals, the vice principals, will go to the schools and observe what the problem is. And then they'll be able to create a solution that is specific to solving, the
And
problem.
if you were a minister of education, you believe all of those things you have reeled out here would be possible given the current situation of the country?
You're limited without funds, right? So you're right. Like if you are in a position of leadership, you can do so much without.
That's if you are
If I was,
minister of
yes.
education in
So
Nigeria.
I would be, if I would be a voice for that, right? Because I'm passionate about it, and so I do it from a place of passion. Like it's, when you're doing something from a place of passion, you take you move mountains to make things
Okay?
happen.
But
And
what debate would you bring forward to increase in budgeting for education in the country?
you have to show that ultimately our GDP would be improved if education was properly invested in. So the government has to see an interest investing in education, and if they see education right now as only being a cost and as an expense, then they may not be motivated. But if they see the correlation and that investment in education directly will improve our GDP. What I mean is the development of as a country, the lifestyle will improve. Things we make made in Nigeria will improve. Like goods made in Nigeria will improve. Ultimately, we will be able to export more things, which is what you want as a country. You want to import less, you want to be able to export more. But if you can show government that the education that has been revamped is equipping the mindset of the young people to be self-reliant, to not wait on jobs, but to create their own jobs. And then if the government can see that, okay, we're not investing in education in the traditional way of education, because I actually don't agree with the traditional way of education. I don't agree in going to university and just doing 4 years and just reading off of textbooks. Like, I think that we need to revamp our and create people that when they come out, they're not looking for jobs, but that they create jobs. So if the government understands that investing in education is worth it, because now the people coming out are going to be entrepreneurs and create wealth like I said, our GDP goes up. I think the government will invest more in education because then they'll see a direct benefit. We'll have less poverty. But now the system of education, unfortunately, creates people that come out looking for jobs. And I think it's flawed. We have to change that around. We have to have people coming out and creating jobs.
So will it then, just as we wrap up this
Yes.
conversation, is it safe to say the successive administration in Nigeria are the reason Nigeria economy and surface look has plummeted this bad?
Leadership, right? As in not, this is a leadership conversation. So yes, I think that ultimately the the thing to change is leadership.
All right. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Miriam Ene of Miriam Ene Foundation. Well, she's been our guest, and of course, we've been talking about rural education and community development as regards leadership in the country. Until we come your way again, I am Chiko Dinakadi. Do have a good time. Bye.